You look at your salary and feel an automatic sense of relief, almost as if that amount that lands every month were proof that, despite the exhaustion, the rush, and the constant feeling that life is passing by too fast, there is some kind of security there. But it is exactly at this point that one of the biggest illusions of adult life lives. Because the question that almost no one has the courage to truly ask is whether your salary actually pays for your life, or if it merely buys your obedience for another 30 days. And before you answer, thinking about the gross amount, the benefits, the contract, or any rational justification. It's worth pausing to observe what is happening outside the bank screen, because market prices go up, the cost of living tightens, your energy fades, your patience shrinks, your body arrives tired, and your mind remains busy even after work hours end. So maybe the biggest mistake is not earning too little, but not realizing how much your life is actually being sold for. And worse, not realizing that this sale may be happening at a loss while you call it stability. Many people repeat as a kind of mental comfort that at least they have a fixed salary, that at least money comes in every month, and that this already brings a sense of predictability. But there is a huge difference between predictability and security. Because knowing the day the money comes in does not mean it is enough to sustain your life without compromising your future. And the problem is that the money that comes in today often already arrives smaller than it should, buys less than it used to, requires more effort to maintain the same standard. And while this happens, something invisible begins to be consumed, which is your vital energy. And this is where the conversation stops being comfortable. Because for a long time you were taught to measure your financial life based on gross annual income, as if that number were a reliable indicator of progress, when in practice it often works only as a vanity metric that looks good on paper, but does not show how much you lost in taxes, how much you spent to remain able to work, how much inflation eroded over time, and most importantly, how many hours of your life were sacrificed for that number to exist. It is completely possible for someone to earn what is considered a good annual amount and still be financially suffocated, emotionally exhausted, and increasingly distant from any sense of freedom, because the big number draws attention. But real life is made up of small leaks that do not appear in the main account. The salary arrives whole on paper. But before it turns into life, it has already been reduced by costs no one likes to consider, such as commuting, eating out, professional appearance, impulsive spending caused by stress, small rewards to endure the routine, and even expenses related to mental and physical health that begin to arise over time. And when you realize it, that money that seemed like proof of your value becomes just a resource to keep you functioning within a system that returns exhaustion in exchange for presence. If you were to analyze your salary not by the amount that comes in, but by the real impact it has on your freedom, the conclusion might be far more uncomfortable than you imagine. Because the problem is not only how much you earn, but how much of your life is being consumed for that money to exist. Since work does not occupy only the official hours of the day, it begins before, when you wake up and get ready, continues in the commute, extends in your mind even after working hours, and still requires recovery time that is rarely considered. So when you look honestly, you realize that you are not selling just 8 hours a day. You are selling a much larger portion of your existence. The body knows this, even when the mind tries to justify it, because the body feels the wear feels when rest is not enough, feels when the week becomes too heavy, and when the weekend turns into just an attempt to recover. And this is not just tiredness. It is a clear sign that the exchange between your time and the money you receive is not balanced. And while many people believe the solution is simply to earn more, the reality is that increasing income without changing this relationship can only increase the level of wear, creating a life where the salary grows, but freedom shrinks. There's also a curious point that almost no one mentions, which is the fact that starting to save money does not always bring immediate peace. Because when you have nothing, the brain enters survival mode and already expects the worst. But when you begin to build a small reserve, a new type of anxiety emerges, which is the fear of losing what took so long to achieve. And while that reserve is still small, it is not enough to generate real tranquility, but it is already enough to generate concern, creating a constant sense of alert, where the person is no longer just trying to survive, but also trying to protect something that is still fragile. Over time, if this reserve grows, something changes in the mind, because the urgency decreases and the brain begins to function more rationally, allowing better decisions, less impulsive, and more strategic. And it is at this point that money stops being just a resource to pay bills and becomes a tool that improves your ability to think, preventing small problems from turning into bigger. But until reaching this point, many people live trapped in a cycle where they work only to sustain the present without being able to build a way out. Now, when you begin to turn all of this into real numbers, perception changes completely. Because by taking the amount that actually enters your account and subtracting all work-related costs, including transportation, food, appearance, emotional spending, and even recovery costs, what remains is your real profit. And when you divide that amount by the total hours that work occupies in your life, including preparation time, commuting, mental concern, and recovery, you discover the real value of your life hour. And that number can be much lower than you imagined, sometimes reaching a level where it becomes clear that you are selling your life for a value that barely sustains your own existence. From there, an inevitable question arises, which is whether you would accept selling an hour of your life for that amount if the exchange were direct, without narrative, without apparent stability, and without emotional justifications. Because that is exactly what happens every day, just in a diluted way. And when that amount is not enough to sustain your life with dignity and still allow you to build a future, it becomes evident that the problem is not only financial, but structural. And this becomes worse when you consider the impact on your future self. Because every hour you sell today is an hour that is no longer invested in something that could generate more freedom later. And when all your time and energy are consumed by survival, there is no room left to develop skills, test new paths, or build something that does not depend directly on your constant presence, creating an invisible delay that accumulates over the years. This delay is reinforced by exhaustion, because a tired mind does not want to build a future. It just wants immediate relief. And this leads to choices that keep the cycle running, where the person feels busy all the time, but does not truly move forward. And it is at this point that the so-called exhaustion tax charges the highest price, not only in money, but in lost time and opportunities that are never seized. To change this reality, it is necessary to define a clear limit, a minimum acceptable value for your life hour, below which you no longer agree to negotiate. And this requires a shift in mindset. While you stop accepting any exchange and begin to evaluate more carefully where you are placing your time, applying the logic that not everything that fills your schedule actually contributes to your progress. And by eliminating low-impact tasks, you can recover hours that can be used strategically. These recovered hours are not just free time, but opportunities to build something that increases the value of your hour. Whether through developing new skills, creating sources of income that do not depend exclusively on your time, or repositioning what you already know how to do, and over time, this begins to generate a real change where your hourly income increases. Your dependence decreases, and your mind starts to have more space to think and act with clarity. In addition, it is essential to define your buyback value, that is, how much it is worth to you to recover an hour of your own life. Because this creates a natural filter that prevents you from accepting tasks and commitments that do not make sense, protecting your time and energy more consciously. And when you begin to apply this concept, something changes in the way you position yourself, because you start to respect your own time more. And consequently, others begin to respect it as well. In the end, escaping the rat race is not about making a lot of money overnight, but about stopping selling your life cheaply, understanding the real value of your time, and making decisions that gradually increase your freedom. Building a life where money stops being just a survival tool and becomes an ally in creating a lighter, more conscious existence that is more aligned with what truly matters. And if you made it this far, it means you have already started to see something most people ignore. So leave your like. Subscribe to the channel to keep diving deeper into this type of content. And comment the word freedom to show that you understood what is really at stake.